This is Emanuela, 19 years old, the second daughter of 5 children. She had plans. She knew what she wanted her life to look like in 5 years. Then the fever came. Her family took her to a clinic. 3 weeks of this back and forth. Now this is the prophet, Prophet Stevens. He had a reputation of seeing things. The type that happens when a man looks at you for a long moment and then says something specific about your life that he should not have been able to know. The aunt went to the prophet and he did not ask to examine her. He simply said, the enemy in that household is simply using the girl's body as a doorway. He told her that the fever is not medical, and if they do not bring her for deliverance, the enemy will succeed. Remember, she was 19 years old, and she would not come home for 4 years. This is what sustained confinement, dressed in spiritual languages, does to a person. It does not break the body, it rebuilds the mind in the image of the captor, and by the time it is finished, the cage does not need walls anymore because the cage is inside her. You see, by the 4th year, Emanuela had stopped counting days. She had stopped asking when. She had stopped feeling the difference between the locked room and the open courtyard, because the open courtyard had just become a large version of the locked room. She performed the prayers. She fasted when instructed. She attended the prophet's sessions. She helped with tasks in the compound. And this is the part of Emanuela's story that disturbed me most. Not the locked room, not the imposed fasting, not the interrupted sleep. She became useful. She had a function in that place. And a function, when you have lost everything else, feels like a reason to exist. She was 23 years old. She had entered at 19. She had a life she no longer fully remembered. And she had forgotten, in the most fundamental sense, how to want to live. As many of us will never understand from the outside, that is not weakness. That is what happens to any human being when their environment controls everything they eat, everything they think, everything they sleep, everything they fear for long enough. We were not built to resist that. None of us were. While Emanuela was losing track of years inside that compound, this lady, Chidima, a lady she had known since secondary school, was on the other side of the world. Chidima had traveled to the United Kingdom right after secondary school. She went for a 2-year program that stretched slightly longer. When she came back, 4.5 years later, the first thing she did was to ask about her friend, Emanuela. What she was told shocked her completely. Emanuela was at a prayer camp. She was going through a deliverance that was taking longer than expected, that the prophet said she was not ready to live yet. You see, Chidima had been in the United Kingdom for 4.5 years. Emanuela had been in the prayer camp for 3.5 years. She did not ask another question. She gathered 3 people she trusted. Her uncle, a retired civil servant from their area, and a woman from their old secondary school who worked at the local government office. She did not pray about it. She did not fast. She did not go to any prophet to ask for spiritual guidance. She just got into her car. It was a Wednesday morning. Prophet Stevens was conducting a prayer session with 3 other families in the main prayer hall. The prophet came out when he heard the disturbance He looked at Chidinma with the calm authority that had worked on everyone who had ever stood in that compound. He began to speak about God's work, about the deliverance process, about how interference from the outside could damage what had been built. Chidinma looked at him for a moment, and then she said, "I am not here to discuss God with you. I am here for Emanuela. And if she is not walking out of this gate with me in the next 10 minutes, the next person who walks through this gate will be from the police." The civil servant behind her held up a paper, a formal complaint prepared before they came. Prophet Stevens looked at the paper. He looked at Chidinma. He looked at the uncle. And the authority, that quiet, absolute, and unquestionable authority that had held Emanuela for 4 years, left his face. He called for Emanuela. She came out from the back of the compound. Slowly, she walked the way someone walks when they have forgotten that running towards something good is allowed. When she saw Chidinma, something in her face, something that had been still for a very long time, moved. She did not go home immediately. She sat in Chidinma's car outside the compound for 40 minutes, without speaking, just sitting. The gate was behind her. The world was in front of her. And she sat between them for 40 minutes without moving. The first thing she said, after the 4 years, after the locked room, after the imposed fasting, after the interrupted sleep, after everything that was done to her mind and her body and her sense of who she was, the first thing she said was, "Is my brother all right?" Not "I am free," not "thank you," not "take me home." Is my brother all right? Because after 4 years of being told that living would destroy her siblings, that was the first thought her mind produced when the gate finally closed behind her. That is what 4 years of that compound did. That is the real crime. Not the locked room, not the hunger, not the years. The fact that she walked out of the gate a free woman and her first thought was still his. That was the crime. I want to stay with you for a few more minutes because I do not think it is enough to tell you what happened to Emanuela and then simply ask you to share the video. I think we need to talk about what this story actually means, not just for her, for all of us. There are prayer camps and deliverance houses operating right now across Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, and every country where the church has deep roots in the community. Some of them are genuine. Some of them are led by people who sincerely believe in what they are doing. I am not here to condemn every prayer house that has ever existed, but I'm here to say something clearly that the church has not been saying loud enough. A man of God who removes your phone is not protecting your deliverance. He is protecting himself. Think about what the prophet did. He did not need chains. He did not need guards at the gate. He needed 3 things. 1, a fever that broke at the right moment to make him look like God. 2, a family that loved their daughter so much that they could not imagine that the man they trusted with her was the danger. And 3, 1 sentence: if you leave, your siblings will die. That is all it took. 1 sentence spoken to a 20-year-old girl who loved her family And that sentence held her. This is not unique to Emanuela's story. This is the architecture of every spiritual trap that has ever been built. Find the person's deepest love. Find what they would sacrifice anything for, and tell them that their freedom is the price someone else will pay. That is not God speaking. That is a man who has studied human vulnerability and learned how to use it. She was not a troubled girl. She was not someone her family worried about. She was simply a young person at the beginning of the life she was building for herself, and she started having these severe headaches. Then the fever came, high temperature, weakness, days in bed when she should have been in class. Her family took her to a clinic. They gave her medication. The medication helped briefly, and then the fever returned. 3 weeks of this back and forth, the clinic, the medication, the brief relief, and then the return. Now put yourself in her mother's position for just a moment. 3 weeks of watching your daughter suffer. 3 weeks of medication that is not holding. 3 weeks of not knowing what is wrong or what it will end. And in this situation, Emanuela's aunt extended a hand. Her aunt was her mother's younger sister, a devoted member of a white garment congregation in their community. Now this is the prophet, Prophet Stevens. He had been in that community for over 20 years. He wore white always, white robe, white cap, a wooden staff, no shoes inside the compound. He told his followers that the ground was holy, and shoes were an insult to what God had consecrated there. He had a reputation of seeing things, the type that happens when a man looks at you for a long moment and then says something specific about your life that he should not have been able to know. That reputation, as you can see, was his most powerful tool. The aunt went to the prophet and told him about Emanuela's condition, and he did not ask to examine her. He did not ask for medical records. He simply said, the enemy in that household is simply using the girl's body as a doorway. He told her that the fever is not medical, and if they do not bring her for deliverance, the enemy will succeed. The aunt brought this message to Emanuela's mother, and frightened, exhausted, trusting her sister, trusting the prophet her sister trusted, she agreed. Now Emanuela was told she was going to the prayer camp for a few days, a week at most, to receive prayers for her healing. She packed a small bag. Remember, she was 19 years old, and she would not come home for 4 years. When Emanuela arrived at the compound, she was still thinking in days and weeks. The prophet received her with calm and authority. He walked around her slowly. He looked at her for a long time without speaking. In that moment, when someone looks at you with that kind of focused certainty, something in you begins to believe they are seeing something real. Then he said, "What is in you has been in your family for 3 generations. Your grandmother made an agreement that was never broken, and you are paying the price." He told her the deliverance will take time, that she must stay in the compound and submit to the process completely. Emanuela told her family that she understood, and then within the first 2 weeks, the fever began to subside. Now you need to understand what that moment meant. The medication from the clinic had not broken the fever consistently, but 2 weeks at the prayer camp, and it was lifting. Put yourself in her position. You are 19 and you have been sick for over a month. You are away from home for the first time in your life. The fever that nothing else has touched is finally going away. If it were you, what would you conclude? As most of us would conclude in that moment, she believed. She called her mother and told her she was improving and she would stay a little longer. Her mother thanked God, and her aunt wept with relief. What none of them knew, what Emanuela herself did not know, was that the fever had simply run its natural course. 3 to 4 weeks was its cycle. It would have subsided whether she was at the camp or at home in her own bed. But the timing made it look like a miracle, and miracle in that environment transfer authority completely. From that moment, Emanuela stopped questioning the prophet. Now, gradually, the rules began to change. The way things changed when someone is being careful not to move too fast. At first, she was free to move within the compound, make phone calls, and receive visitors. Family came on Sundays, stayed with her in the open courtyard. She told them she was fine. She believed she was fine. Then the prophet told her that phone calls were interfering in her deliverance, that the voices from people in her old life were keeping her connected to the very thing that needed to be broken. So the calls became weekly, then monthly, and then only when the prophet permitted. Visitors were told she was in an intensive period of prayer and could not be disturbed. The family accepted this because this was a man of God, because he had healed their daughter's fever, and questioning him felt everything like questioning God himself. You see, when faith and fear combined in the same person at the same time, the ability to ask questions becomes almost impossible. And then came the threat that locked everything in place. The prophet called Emanuela into a private section. He looked at her for a long time, and then he said, "The deliverance is progressing, but something in you is still resisting, and I need you to understand what happens if you leave before the deliverance completes. It will not return to you. It will go to your siblings, your brother, and your sisters. If you walk out of this place before I release you, you are signing their death warrants." By this time, she had spent a year in the prayer camp. She was 20 years old. Imagine if you are her in that moment. You already believe this man healed your fever. You already believe he can see into your bloodline. You already believe there is something in you that is real and dangerous. And now he is telling you that the price for your freedom is your siblings' lives. As much as everything in her wanted to go home, she stayed, not because she was weak, but because she loved her brother and her sisters more than her own freedom. That is a 20-year-old girl being handed an impossible choice by a man who knew exactly what he was doing. This is the part of Emanuela's story that she finds it hardest to speak about. And I want to honor that difficulty by telling it carefully. You see, there were periods triggered by what the prophet called spiritual crisis. Moments when he said the demon inside her was becoming violent. When she was moved to a smaller room at the back of the compound, a room with a lock on the outside, she was told this was for her protection, that in the state she was in, she could harm herself and others without knowing it. She was in that room for days at times, sometimes longer. And as much as I want you to feel the horror of that room, I want you to understand something more disturbing than the room itself. There was this fasting that was imposed on her. 3 days without food, then a meal. 2 days without, then a meal. It was during this period that something horrible and bad was done to her. Remember, she was told that there was a demon inside of her that was becoming violent. At a night, something will enter the small room that she had been kept, and before she knows it, she will feel weak, and by the time she gains conscious, she will realize someone or that thing that entered the room had taken advantage of her. She told the prophet about what was happening, and he said it was the demon that was also fighting for a space in her life. It went on for several times because anytime she will be in that small room, the said demon will come and have its way with her. But strangely, it never came when she was with the other girls in the main room. Now in this camp, they were woken at 2 in the morning for prayer section, 4 in the morning. The interrupted sleep sustained over months does something to a person's ability to think clearly, to trust their own perception, to remember who they were before. And as time went by, she began to forget the polytechnic, the friends, the plans, the girl who had packed a small bag for a week. She began to believe, genuinely believe, that she was as dangerous as the prophet said she was, that she was protecting her family by staying, that the prophet, whatever she felt about him in her darkest moment, was the only thing that is standing between her and something that would destroy everything she loved. This is what sustained confinement, dressed in spiritual languages, does to a person. It does not break the body, it rebuilds the mind in the image of the captor, and by the time it is finished, the cage does not need walls anymore because the cage is inside her. You see, by the 4th year, Emanuela had stopped counting days. She had stopped asking when. She had stopped feeling the difference between the locked room and the open courtyard, because the open courtyard had just become a large version of the locked room. She performed the prayers. She fasted when instructed. She attended the prophet's sessions. She helped with tasks in the compound. And this is the part of Emanuela's story that disturbed me most. I want to stay with you for a few more minutes because I do not think it is enough to tell you what happened to Emanuela and then simply ask you to share the video. I think we need to talk about what this story actually means, not just for her, for all of us. There are prayer camps and deliverance houses operating right now across Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, and every country where the church has deep roots in the community. Some of them are genuine. Some of them are led by people who sincerely believe in what they are doing. I am not here to condemn every prayer house that has ever existed, but I'm here to say something clearly that the church has not been saying loud enough. A man of God who removes your phone is not protecting your deliverance. He is protecting himself. Think about what the prophet did. He did not need chains. He did not need guards at the gate. He needed 3 things. 1. A fever that broke at the right moment to make him look like God. 2. A family that loved their daughter so much that they could not imagine that the man they trusted with her was the danger. And 3, 1 sentence. If you live, your siblings will die. That is all it took. 1 sentence spoken to a 20-year-old girl who loved her family. And that sentence held her. This is not unique to Emanuela's story. This is the architecture of every spiritual trap that has ever been built. Find the person's deepest love, find what they would sacrifice anything for, and tell them that their freedom is the price someone else will pay. That is not God speaking. That is a man who has studied human vulnerability and learned how to use it. I want every parent, every aunt, every uncle, every family member watching today to hear this. Before you take someone you love to a prayer camp or deliverance house, ask one question, just one. What happens if we want to leave? If the answer is complicated, if there is a hesitation, if there is spiritual language about timing and readiness and the danger of leaving too soon, that hesitation is your answer. A place of genuine healing does not need to hold you. It releases you when you are ready to go. And to anyone watching today who recognizes something in Emanuela's story, not necessarily the prayer camp, maybe a church where asking questions is treated as a sin, is treated as a sign of weak faith, maybe a pastor whose instructions cannot be questioned without consequences, maybe a spiritual environment where your access to the outside world, your family, your friends, your own independent thinking has slowly been reduced in the name of devotion. I want you to hear this as clearly as I can say it. Genuine faith does not shrink your world, it expands it. If your faith is making you smaller, if it is cutting you off from people who love you, if it is using your love for others as a chain around your own freedom, that is not God. That is a man. And a man, no matter what he wears, no matter how low his... If this video moved something in you today, if Emanuela's story made you think about someone you know, or something you have seen in a church or a spiritual environment, I want you to watch what I uploaded before this one. I want you to watch what I uploaded before this video. It is the story of 3 mothers in rural Cameroon and a pastor who told them that their children were under a curse.